So you can go ahead and get the ball rolling. Guys, we are joined with the Honorable Shawn K Richards, Deputy Prime Minister and leader of the People's Action Movement. Um, he has given us some time. I know he's a very busy man, but we appreciate him taking the time out nonetheless to join us this morning. How are you, Honorable?
Good morning to everyone. Good morning to your listeners. I'm very good. I'm giving God thanks.
All righty then.
Good morning from Antigua.
Good
Mr.
morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I'm doing fine, thank you. I just read a letter that was addressed to you by one Dr. Timothy Harris, which was, I had to take time to count. I took a few minutes to count, 18 pages long.
Yes, sir.
Because of the fact that I'm not able to stay with you as long as I would probably like, given the exigencies of the situation, I must ask you, have you had a chance to complete the reading of that letter as yet?
I haven't read the letter in its entirety as yet, but I know that the letter is in the public domain. I find that quite interesting because the Prime Minister continues to say to persons that we are in a period of mourning. We shouldn't be entertaining any politics, but not only that letter is in the public domain, but also the letter which was sent to him is in the public domain. I know for a fact that it came from within his circles because that letter was signed by the Honorable Mark Grantley, and then it made its way to me for signature and for delivery to the Prime Minister. So not even the Honorable Mark Grantley has a copy with both of our signatures attached. The only person who, other than myself, who would have it is the Honorable Prime Minister, and I have not shared that letter with absolutely anyone. Yeah. So on one hand, he says to persons, it's a period of mourning, leave the politics alone at this particular point in time, but at the same time, on the other hand, he is certainly playing the politics.
What is your? Why do you think he would inject this or put this out in the public domain, Honorable Shawn Richards? I mean, to what advantage would it be to him to do so? Or what advantage he could gain from doing that? In your
I suppose that he feels that placing that particular letter in the public domain would be damaging to myself, to the Honorable Mark Grantley, and to our colleagues. What I can say to you, though, is that the letter has in a number of inaccuracies that at the right point in time we will respond to. And I think it is also interesting from the point of view that I think we were quite reasonable in terms of the letter which we sent to the Prime Minister, because at that point in time we said to him, look, we are willing to negotiate with you, we are willing to bargain with you, we are willing to settle our differences. These are our points of concerns, and these are possible solutions to our points of concern. Instead of giving us a response that, hi, here, I am willing to compromise on this, I am willing to compromise on that, but not on this particular issue, he sends a letter basically saying to us that I am not compromising on any issue, and therefore, he has taken the route in terms of bringing team unity to an end.
Wow. Do you think that, who do you think that would, I know you might be a little biased in this regard, but who do you think that would benefit politically? I mean, I know I have my friends in the government circles, financial circles, who have commended Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris for his management of the St. Kitts Nevis economy. There are politicians here who suggest that we should model ourselves after St. Kitts because of how he's handled the situation. So this may redound to his political benefit. Are you of that mind? I am
not necessarily of that mind, but I am of the view that ultimately it is the electorate within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis that will make such a decision.
Okay.
And
do you command
I should add here that in terms of the management of the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis, that the entire cabinet is who he should be given the necessary kudos for ensuring that the economy is properly managed and not one single individual that is the Prime Minister, as he has quite often made it out to be.
Okay, understood. Can I just get one final question? What happens next after the period of mourning? My understanding is that the Governor General you've already gone to the Governor General essentially to indicate that you have no confidence along with your coalition partners. What happens next? Is it an automatic election, or do you have enough support to become the new Prime Minister, or it has to go to the polls?
The Governor General has indicated that he needs to seek legal advice. Upon getting that legal advice, he will report to us with an answer. So at this particular point in time, I can't say specifically how it will play out. My own view is that I do believe that eventually we may go to the polls.
Okay. All right. I'm sad to say, but I have to take my leave here from Observer Radio in Antigua. But Honorable Shawn Richards, I just want to say thank you so much for being always accommodating to me and to the Observer team in sharing and giving your perspective on the situation in St. Kitts Nevis Federation. Thank you so much, sir. Have a wonderful week. Well, as best a weekend as you can possibly have. Let me put it that way. Hope you get enough time to finish reading the letter.
Thank you for having me on Observer also, and you are most welcome. Yes, I will ensure that I read the letter in its full length and comprehend it.
Well, Honorable, you are, yes, Darren, thank you for joining us, but we will take over now.
All right.
As we have some questions
indeed.
for our Honorable.
Thank you so much for your kindness. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a wonderful weekend.
So, yes, Honorable, I know that you said that you didn't get a moment to read the letter, but I did spend my night going through it. One of the things that I found very interesting was the tone of the letter. And the Prime Minister expressed that your letter is disrespectful and without merit. He has also refused to publicly respond to the subsequent actions of the 6 representatives who want him out of cabinet, because we should be focused on mourning. Do you find that response or lack thereof disrespectful? And why not just file a motion of no confidence instead of raising a debatable legal issue with the Governor General?
Certainly, I find his response to be extremely disrespectful. The public would be aware that on the 13th of March, the People's Action Movement had its convention. We would have indicated then a number of issues that we have with the Prime Minister. As such, the Honorable Mark Grantley and myself subsequently requested a meeting with the Prime Minister to address the concerns that we have. In the first instance, the Prime Minister indicated to us that he is unable to accommodate us because he is ill. At the same time, when the Prime Minister was saying that, the Prime Minister was seen at several different hotels around the Federation, entertaining meetings with his advisors, and the Friday he also had an executive emergency meeting of his party, the PLP. We met the Wednesday. The Prime Minister said that we did not give him an agenda in advance of the meeting, and as such, he needed time to respond to the issues that we raised. We met the following Thursday, just over 8 days after. The Prime Minister came to that meeting and he basically offered solutions in terms of the issues that we had raised. We said, okay. We then sent the Prime Minister a letter and said to the Prime Minister that we would appreciate a response by Wednesday of this week. Wednesday came, we did not receive that response. At 1:51 a.m. in the morning, when persons are sleeping, we received a response from the Prime Minister via email, totaling some 18 pages. As I said, when you read through it, we note that there are some inaccuracies in terms of the response. But we also note that basically the Prime Minister found absolutely no merit in terms of any of the issues that we raise to say to us that, okay, I agree with this, and so let us see how we can work out this particular issue. I don't agree with this. Let us discuss it, and let us see if we can compromise on this other issue. Nothing of the sort. Now, with the issues that we raise, these are issues mostly in the interest of the public. How resources are being shared amongst persons who are eligible for some of those resources, such as persons who have an interest in the PAP program, the STEP program, land distribution, distribution of houses, etc. So basically, it is not to the elected representatives that the Prime Minister is being disrespectful, but he is being disrespectful to the people whose issues we have raised in those particular letters. Because at the end of the day, we are servants of the people, and we raise these issues in the best interest of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis.
All right. Azim, do you have a question for the Honorable?
Well, I mean, it's it's interesting to see how the discourse has developed over the past few months, um, and leading up to this most recent letter. Because, as you said, reading through it, it does seem as though point after point, the Prime Minister is suggesting that there is little to no merit in the points that were raised by yourself and the Honorable Mark Brantley. I think that there may be somewhat of a disconnect, however, between the positions raised by yourself and the Premier and the people, meaning that some persons seem to feel as though what is happening here is a bit of political maneuvering by all parties involved, including the Prime Minister. Based on what you said just now, it seems as though the Prime Minister seems to continually be buying time, even up to what he said last night. Even up to what he said last night in relation to, oh, we're in a period of mourning and we should let this time pass. It does seem as though there's always some strategy being implemented to push the issue further and further down the road. Do you have any idea to what end, that might be taking place? What may be the reason for just not facing this straight on, whether or not he agrees, disagrees, wants to find a solution or not find a solution? What do you think is his end goal or the reason for him seemingly just pushing the issues further down the road?
Mr. Bailey, indeed, you are a very intelligent young man. Your sense of analysis is very correct. And I do believe that, like you, a number, the vast majority of persons out there recognize the very same thing, that the Prime Minister is using every single excuse that he can to kick the ball further and further down the play field. And that isn't in the best interest of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The people of St. Kitts and Nevis, they want to see these particular issues being settled. They want to ensure that in all respects, there is a stability within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. It is for that reason why we attempted to negotiate with the Prime Minister to maintain stability, to maintain the government, to ensure that the best interests of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis is first and foremost at all points in time. I agree that the Prime Minister is buying for time. The Prime Minister, I suppose, wants to go into a general election, but perhaps he isn't ready for such. And so he is trying to buy time, while at the same time he is trying to deceive the public in terms of the issues which we have raised on their behalf.
So you're saying that you feel that one of the reasons why there seems to be this delay in facing the issues head on is for him to prepare himself or the PLP for the, well, now the seemingly impending general election?
Yes, I agree with that, because even prior to us raising these particular issues, we became aware of the fact that the Prime Minister has been speaking to persons about being candidates in several different constituencies. You can go to different constituencies and persons will verify that information for you. So I suppose he doesn't feel like his candidates are ready. Perhaps his machinery isn't ready in terms of a general elections, because we feel that that is where the Prime Minister is heading, and he is trying to ensure that he has as much time as possible to prepare, while the vast majority of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis continue to suffer because of this political fallout. As I said, we went to the table to negotiate with the Prime Minister in good faith to prevent the country, to prevent the people of St. Kitts and Nevis from having to face a general elections, but to stabilize things within team unity amongst PLP-PAM and the CCM, is so that the people that we represent can continue to benefit from this particular administration.
I want to ask, like, because well, firstly, let me just put this out there. Team Unity, as was presented to the people in the last general election, I think it's now safe to say, after the submission from several MPs to the Governor General, is no longer that coalition no longer exists. Is that safe to say?
It is safe to say that, yes.
Okay.
All right. So was there a situation where, although there were differences, although there may have been issues with how, you know, the certain topics were, or certain issues were being dealt with, was there a situation where the members of Team Unity could have decided, hey, look, we believe that we want to contest the upcoming general election separately, but in the interest of the people, given them and the mandate that we were given in the past election, we will continue to manage the affairs of the country until such time? Is that what you're saying you were trying to achieve, or was that just not really an issue?
Indeed, you are correct, because if at the end of the term, the different parties had taken a decision to contest as individual parties, that of course was quite possible, and no one would have run away from that. But in the interim, we said to the Prime Minister, we have differences. Let us address our differences. And truth be told, that we tried to address the differences privately rather than coming to the public domain with these differences. Team Unity has been in government for the last 7 years, and some of these issues have been ongoing issues. We, however, recognize that the public gave us a mandate, and though we had differences, we tried as best as possible to put those differences aside and to work on behalf of the public. And I would be the first to admit that we made a number of strides in terms of ensuring that the people of St. Kitts benefited from the Team Unity administration. But in any relationship, there must be trust. And the trust had begun to break down long ago. But we tried to see how that trust could be restored. And as I said, even after we went to the public, we still reached out to the Prime Minister. And I say we reached out to him because after the convention, the Prime Minister made absolutely no attempt to reach out to the Honorable Mark Brantley and myself to have a discussion on the issues. Recognizing that as the leader, he did no such thing, we decided to take the leadership role and to reach out to the Prime Minister to entertain discussions on these matters. The last correspondence that we sent him on Saturday, we were willing to go back to the table for yet a third time and entertain discussions with the Prime Minister to save team unity. But you have read the response and you have recognized from the response that the Prime Minister basically said to us, I am not willing to compromise. Every single issue that you all have raised, they are of no consequence, they are null, they are void. And so I have no interest in having any further discussions with you guys. Hence, the Prime Minister is ultimately responsible for where we are at this particular point in time. We have said from the people
before you continue, because that is very important statement you just made. Are you suggesting that as time rolls on and we look back at this particular time in our political history, that it should be noted that the person who is ultimately responsible for the dissolution of team unity is the Prime Minister, Dr. Timothy Harris?
Yes, I am saying exactly that, because we made every effort, privately, publicly, to ensure that team unity remained as is. We reached out to him, we asked him for meetings, and this is what is in the public domain. But there are MPs who can say to you that they held private meetings with the Prime Minister and raise some of these issues in the private meetings. As a matter of fact, before the PAM convention, the Monday before that convention, the Prime Minister and I sat in a meeting and we discussed some of these very same issues. The Honorable Lindsey Grant can say the same thing to you. The Honorable John L. Powell can say the same thing to you. The Honorable Eugene Hamilton, who likes to note things in terms of letters, he can provide you with letters where he would have raised issues with the Prime Minister. Some of these issues would have been raised within cabinet. Likewise, the Honorable Mark Grantley would have raised issues with the Prime Minister. The Honorable Eric Evelyn, I recall, on one occasion within a cabinet, said to us that we need to have a retreat amongst the cabinet members because there are issues, real issues, that we need to discuss and come to some agreement on these particular issues. We were promised that the retreat would be organized, but to date, no retreat has been held.
Okay,
understood. Go ahead, Jade.
So as I said, I sat and I read the entire 18 pages last night, and I think some of the other viewers and listeners have done so as well, and they are of the opinion that some of the questions or some of the demands, they don't understand how why they would be met from the Prime Minister. One that I found most interesting was number 16, which says also to keep to the spirit of the Team Unity Agreement, you made an unequivocal statement that the People's Labour Party will not run candidates in any constituency where PAM and CCM are fielding candidates. Constituencies 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now, would PLP support candidates, individuals, or parties contesting against PAM and CCM? PAM and CCM commit to the same not to run candidates in 3, 6, and 7, and not to support any candidate in individuals or parties contesting against PLP. Were you able to see his response to that one, number 16?
I think I would have glimpsed through the response for that particular one, Jane. I don't know if there's a specific question that you want to ask.
Yes, it is actually about his last statement, which says, Deputy Prime Minister, I wish to draw to your attention your statements at the launch of your new candidate for constituency number 1. At that event, you boldly stated that PAM was prepared to field candidates in all 8 constituents on St. Kitts if necessary. Was this something that you mentioned?
I did, but I think the qualifying words in there are if necessary. And if necessary, and if the entire statement is placed in context It was a question relative to if it is that PLP is going to field candidates in all of the constituencies, what will the People's Action Movement do? And I made it abundantly clear, then if that is the case, then PAM likewise will field candidates in all of the different constituencies. Let us go back, and we would recall that in 2015, the Prime Minister himself and the Honorable Sam Conda were accommodated in constituencies number 7 and number 3. In the elections of 2020, the Prime Minister asked for further accommodation in constituency number 6 that PAM had fielded a candidate in 2015. We agreed to do so. And we have kept that promise, so much so that we have had our supporters in those constituencies who have said to us they feel like they have been abandoned by the People's Action Movement in those constituencies. They have complained that the PLP appears to be only looking after their supporters in those particular constituencies. And that is an issue that we have been facing. But at no point in time, we attempted to announce or to have anyone go around campaigning in any of those constituencies to say they are campaigning on behalf of the People's Action Movement and will be a candidate in the upcoming general elections on behalf of the People's Action Movement. Because part of keeping the promise, as I said, is about trust. And there cannot be trust when you have persons going around and making those particular statements. I am going to be the next candidate for PAM, whether in constituency number 7, 3, or 6, because you are signaling to persons that there will be no team unity and you're going to be running on your own separate platform. We have believed in team unity. We have lived by the principles of team unity. We have kept the promise in terms of our promise to the people and our promise to the other political parties comprising team unity. Hence, when the question came, because as I said it to you earlier, we have heard of persons going around in different constituencies indicating that they're going to be the next candidate for PLP in this particular constituency. And you have had cases of that in constituencies number 8, constituency number 4, constituency number 2, and other constituencies. And personally, it can speak factually to persons who have said to me they have been approached by the Prime Minister in terms of being a candidate for this constituency or for that constituency. On the other hand, there isn't a single individual who can say that someone has approached them on behalf of the People's Action Movement to say, I am going to be the candidate, whether in constituencies number 3, 6, or 7, because we have stayed away from that. It doesn't engender trust. It is not part of keeping the promise. And the People's Action Movement, we have always said, putting people first. We are here to look after the people. And so that is what we have continued to do, rather than to undermine team unity as the Prime Minister has been doing.
What I also found interesting is that I know I'm very new to the political game and all of this, but I know that usually Prime Minister's terms they last throughout the electoral period, so 5 years. But what I read yesterday was that if the Honorable Timothy Harris, Prime Minister, agrees to the terms laid out in your letter, that you would allow him to only stay until 2023. I think that's what I read. Constitutionally, how would that work? Because as I said, I am pretty sure from what I've learned so far that all terms last 5 years. So 2023 would mean that he would only be sitting for 3 years. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. But again, as part of the promise made by Team Unity, no one would serve for Prime Minister for more than 2 terms. You saw that when that was mentioned in the letter after 2023, you basically would begin the transition process towards whoever we determine we would want to see as the next Prime Minister emerging from Team Unity. Quite importantly, though, Jade, I would want to point out to the public that these were basically terms of negotiations, so that the Prime Minister could have come back to us and he could have said, look, I do not agree with you on this particular point. This is what I want to propose to you all relative to that particular point. Let us have a discussion about it. Let us negotiate on it. Let us be willing to compromise on it. And we would have been quite willing to do so. In negotiations, of course, you start with a reference point. And from that reference point, you hope that you get to a point whereby all parties are satisfied with the resolution. And that is simply what we were attempting to do. So even though it says by the end of 2023, it doesn't mean that at the end of the day, that is exactly what would have happened. The Prime Minister could have come back to us, for example, and said, okay, let us agree to the end of 2024, since the next general election is due just about in June, also of 2025. Let us agree to the end of 2024, and we negotiate on that. Let us agree to that. And who knows, we very well might have accepted that. Because while it is that you may not fully agree on a particular point and you're able to compromise on it, there are other points of reference that because you're able to agree on that particular point of reference, you make those particular compromises in the best interest of the public. That is exactly what we sought to do. Those were the terms that we put forward. But the Prime Minister could have said, okay, on point number one, this is my point of departure, or this is what I think ought to happen. This is the compromise for me. But as I read from the letter, there isn't any compromise on any single point that we raised.
Do you think all of this could have been avoided by, instead of basing all of this on a promise, putting it into the Constitution as something that is binded by law, instead of just going based on somebody promising to do these things?
It is not everything, Jade, that can be placed in the Constitution relative to the term limits for Prime Minister. Admittedly, we went to Parliament during our first term with that particular piece of legislation. The then opposition support was needed because you needed 2/3 of the members, the elected members of Parliament, to support it for you to effect that constitutional change. We did not get the support of the opposition then, so we were not able to get that particular bill to pass. You would recognize, though, that after the elections of 2020, we of course have the necessary 2/3 to have passed that particular piece of legislation. And one really would have hoped that it would have been done very early in the second term. Part of the Charlestown Accord speaks to the good governance agenda. And the good governance agenda encompasses a number of things: the fixed election dates, the term limits for the Prime Minister, electoral reform, boundary changes, freedom of information, and a number of other pieces of legislation that we feel that we really should have already dealt with as a Team Unity administration. And so I must apologize as the leader of the People's Action Movement to the public in terms of our failure to enact some of the legislation relative to good governance. We, however, gave the public our full assurance that after the next general elections, I expect calm to prevail, and certainly the good governance agenda would be enacted, because that too is in the best interest of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Well, I have one more question before I let Azim jump back in. Because now we've seen that the unity construct has dissolved, and that from the CCM and PAM side, they're saying that they no longer have faith in the Prime Minister to lead the country. Who do you think would be a better leader, since he is no longer somebody that you see can do this job?
Let me say that 6 elected representatives signed that particular letter. And I am of the view that all 6 elected representatives are quite capable of leading the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I have seen all of the elected representatives at work on behalf of their constituents. I have served in cabinet with them. They are all quite competent individuals, be it the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, the Honorable Eric Evelyn, the Honorable Matt Brantley, the Honorable John L. Powell, the Honorable Lindsey Grant, and myself. Now, in respect of the letter that was sent to the Governor General, we indicated to the Governor General that the support is for myself to assume that of the Prime Ministership. But as I said to you, all of the individuals are quite capable.
Okay.
All right. Well, I mean, just piggybacking off of that question and what your response was. Of course, we have seen the response from the Governor General in relation to the letter and his suggestion that he needs to go and seek legal advice. But from your understanding, what are some of the possible options afforded not only to the Governor General, but also to the Prime Minister?
I am no lawyer, so in terms of being a legal expert, I certainly cannot speak in that particular language. You asked for some of the options which are available. Some options which are available, of course, would be for the Prime Minister to call a general election. The Prime Minister can indicate that, okay, he is going to resign and allow the Governor General to appoint someone else as Prime Minister. I don't know if any of this will actually have to be played out within the legal arm of government, the judiciary, for the judiciary to render an opinion on any aspect of it, but all those are options.
I mean, the truth is though, like, I know that you and all of the gentlemen who signed that letter are quite intelligent, learned individuals. And so you must have had some idea of or some expectation as to what should happen after presenting that letter. I mean, is it a situation that, because I think what is happening now, the question that is being asked by the public is, oh, so what will happen now? And
literally,
of course, you might not be in a position to dictate what actually happens, but you know, and I'm speaking for myself and just based on what I've heard other people saying, especially over the last 24 hours or so. What's going to happen? Is it a matter that Parliament can get dissolved and then we then get an announcement as to when the next general election is? Is this a matter that, like you said, you'll outline a few options here? But when you signed that letter, what was your hope as you know, as someone who is putting this to the Governor General that this is my position? What was your hope?
Very good question. Let me first of all say that we are in unprecedented waters here in St. Kitts and Nevis, because we have never had a situation like this where a majority of the representatives would have written to the Governor General indicating that they no longer support the Prime Minister, and as such, there is a precedent upon which the Governor General would be able to rely upon in rendering a particular decision. However, the letter which was sent to the Governor General indicates that a majority of the representatives support myself to be the Prime Minister. So if you take that as is, then of course, one would conclude that the expectation would be for the Governor General to appoint Shawn Richards as the Prime Minister. But that is open for a debate, because different persons are providing different opinions on that particular aspect and what the Constitution says from what the Constitution doesn't say. We have full faith that the Governor General would seek the necessary legal advice, as he stated in his correspondence, and make the correct decision based on the legal advice that he has been given. Outside of that, as I said earlier, there are other options that, of course, one can pursue.
What would you how would you describe the relationship presently between the People's Action Movement and the Concerned Citizens Movement?
It is a very healthy relationship. We continue to correspond with each other. We continue to communicate with each other. And it is our hope that in terms of unity, there will be real unity between the People's Action Movement and the Concerned Citizens Movement in terms of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis.
So is it that similar to the situation that we would have had in the past two elections, where team unity was the parties campaigned on a joint platform? Is there any expectation that if we are to go back to the polls as a result of the actions taken by yourself and the other parliamentary representatives, that if we are to go back to the polls, that there would be a joint campaign between the People's Action Movement and the CCM?
Certainly, we will be giving as much support to each other as possible.
So do you guys, as individual parties, feel like you guys would be ready for a general election if it is called?
Having reached to where we are, certainly we will be ready.
Mm. But Shawn, let's I know you're a man that's talk straight. You understand? You're a plain talker, and that is one of the things that I appreciate about you. I have been listening to you speak and several platforms, including the town hall meetings that you guys had. And I'm listening to you speak about some of the issues that would have led us to this particular point. And I must say, I could be wrong, but I sensed almost some hurt in your tone, and because when you're going to even highlight the fact that you have been one of the persons, and we've all seen it, who has been seemingly supporting the Prime Minister throughout the last 7 years. You even made mention of you being at his installation after the last the swearing in after the last election, and you also now speak a lot about a loss of trust, right? And we know trust is a very personal thing. As much as the issues that you would have put forward in your letter to the Prime Minister speaks to what is happening in relation to the public and the people. You speak a lot about a loss of trust. How much did that play into the decisions that you have made now consequently? Because it really does seem like there's a sense of hurt, like a personal sense of betrayal almost, just listening to what you're saying. Am I correct with that? And
you are correct. There is a sense of betrayal. And while it is that some persons have been speaking about this two terms and being Prime Minister, that really isn't the bigger issue for me. The bigger issue for me is many of the things which the Prime Minister has done. When you see persons, for example, on Facebook trying to malign your character, and you know for a fact that these persons are being fed a particular narrative by the Prime Minister, then of course there must be a breakdown of trust. There must be that feeling of betrayal, especially when persons are speaking of things that you know absolutely nothing about. Because to a large extent, that goes to your character, it goes to your integrity as an individual. And so how do you trust that particular person when you know for a fact that the person is involved in these particular postings that you're seeing on social media, etc. When you know for a fact that persons are being told you are sitting in a forum with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister is telling persons who are there in the forum that when you stand up to say something, or if you call in, make negative statements about this particular individual and make positive statements about myself. That must lead to a lack of trust. It must lead to you feeling betrayed by the Prime Minister. And so these are some of the issues which have come to the fore, which indicate to anyone that the Prime Minister is not somebody that you can trust, that you can have confidence in. So yes, there has been a sense of hurt. Yes, there has been that betrayal. Do I hate the Prime Minister? No, I do not hate him. As a matter of fact, I have forgiven the Prime Minister for all that he has done. But in terms of that continued working relationship, when you take the summation of everything, how do you continue to work with someone? How do you continue to repose trust and confidence in someone when you know that individual is out there trying his or her best to undermine you? The last town hall meeting that we had, I spoke to the fact, and I still have the particular information with me, where the Prime Minister would have said to persons that the report indicates that the next minister was at this particular establishment when this particular incident happened.
Funny you mentioned. I was literally getting to that one.
To date, the Prime Minister has never ever asked me a single thing about that particular incident, or what I know of it, or what I don't know of it. And there are other circumstances that I cannot speak to. And so the trust has broken down.
Well, as I said, it's funny that you mentioned that one, because the first demand in the letter that stated that there be an urgent return to the good governance agenda. That includes term limits, electoral reform, activation of the integrity in public life legislation, freedom of information, freedom of the press, as well as legislation that governs the awarding of government contracts. It feels as though, for a lot of us, it feels like this started when the incident at that last lap happened. And so he responded to that first demand by saying, I am amazed that Deputy Prime Minister Richards should have record good governance as the first issue for me to respond to. Minister Richards has been absent from the cabinet for some 10 weeks since 14th February. Minister Brantley would recall that he left the cabinet unceremoniously, saying that he would not return until his name was removed from a police witness statement. I reiterate that I will not be party to any activity which I consider to be illegal. Neither the cabinet, the Prime Minister, nor Minister of National Security can cause a police statement to be altered. What do you say to something like this? Is this along the lines of what you were referring to when you guys outlined that first demand?
Let me say to you that in terms of the trust and the breakdown and the betrayal, it began long before that particular incident. For example, I spoke to you about postings on social media. These postings, you would know, because I'm sure that you all have seen them. It began long before that particular incident at last lap. So for anyone to believe that this is about the last lap incident, it is not about the last lap incident. Moreover, I've said it to you that we have had issues with the person's constituents being able to access certain benefits from the government. When you recognize that you are being told by the Prime Minister that none of your applicants are being taken for this program has come to an end. A hold has been placed on this particular program. But on the other hand, you see the Prime Minister according those benefits to his constituents or to those who he so chooses to do. Then that must lead to a breakdown in trust because you are being undermined. You feel betrayed. How is it that since last year, you make an attempt to get some persons on the PAP program, persons who qualify for the PAP program, and you're told months after that these particular applications are still being reviewed, you're also told that it is only the Prime Minister who can make a decision to place new applicants onto the program, and these persons aren't getting through. But if the very same persons approach the Prime Minister, you recognize that it is being done. It is being done without knowledge to you, without absolutely any consultation to you. I spoke earlier about the 15 houses which were donated by the government of Venezuela, all built in constituency number 7, houses which are free, and not even the representative for constituency number 3, who is also a member of the PLP, elected on a PLP ticket, has been able to receive a single house. What happened to the persons in Nagreet, the persons in Trafalgar, the persons in Buckley's, who also received the effects from the last hurricane? I mean, not even one house would have been built in constituency number 3. Where does the trust come in there? You cannot trust somebody who is going to operate in that particular manner, because it seems as though it is just about myself, it is about my political agenda, and not about the agenda of the people who we said to fair share for all. If that cannot amount to fair share for all, when only one particular constituency is able to receive the benefits of such. When you are being told that you will be assisted in terms of getting certain persons appointed, nothing is being done. But the Prime Minister calls some of those very same persons to his office and say, I can't believe you haven't been appointed as yet. You mean to say the minister hasn't appointed you as yet? And you've sat down in a meeting with the Prime Minister. You have mentioned the very same names to the Prime Minister. He has given you his word that it will be dealt with, and nothing is being done. But yet he goes behind your back. He calls these persons into his office, and he said to the persons, I can't believe the minister hasn't done this. I am going to ensure that within a few days, you are appointed. Again, that doesn't engender trust amongst you and your cabinet colleagues. And these are some of the very real issues that we have spoken to the Prime Minister about. You have an ambassador to the United Nations who has a bi-weekly radio program. And on that bi-weekly radio program, he is heard making disparaging remarks about ministers of government. One would think that he would use the radio program to educate the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis as to the work that he is doing to ensure that benefits come to them. Instead of that, what do you hear? Accusations of this minister being a thief, etc. What about that can engender trust? You go to the Prime Minister, you speak to him in all honesty about it, because it is also an issue that the public has raised. Why is it an ambassador is doing this? Do you think the Cuban ambassador, the Taiwanese ambassador, the Brazilian ambassador, the Venezuelan ambassador can go on a radio program here and make disparaging remarks about any minister of government here? No. As a government, you would ask for that person to be recalled. Do you think that person can step from here, have a radio program be it in Taiwan, Venezuela, Brazil, Cuba, or wherever, and be making disparaging remarks about a minister of government from any of those countries? It would not be accepted. And let me make it abundantly clear. I supported the particular ambassador when the recommendation was made for him to be given that post. I said he was out there with us on the political battlefield, and we know how the politics works. And so I am supportive of him being given that job or being given a job, because he is now out of a job. And so I made it very plain that I am fully in support of him. And this is what the ambassador has been doing. And I don't agree with that.
Have you spoken to the ambassador himself about these issues?
I haven't spoken to the ambassador about those particular issues. Ambassadors are appointed by the Prime Minister. And so I raised that particular issue with the Prime Minister. You said you spent part of your evening last night reading through the response, and you would note the response relative to the ambassador. So basically, he is given the green light for the ambassador to continue to do so. So again, how can that engender trust when you are given the green light for the ambassador to be making disparaging remarks about your cabinet colleagues?
Okay, no, go ahead, Azim. It's okay.
Yeah, I was saying that, I mean, the issue that Jade raised, I think, spoke to your absence in cabinet for some time now. Just for the listeners and the viewers, could you clarify your reason for being absent from cabinet for such a long time?
I took exception to my name being erroneously included in a report. What I can say to you is I think it was sometime during the course of last week, I received correspondence from the Commissioner of Police in which he has stated that in terms of that particular matter, and I read for you.
You have those. You have
further,
it with you. Okay.
It says further, you are in no way implicated in any report sent or given to me with respect to the incident which allegedly occurred on the morning of 8 January 2022. So that I think in terms of that, I am now able to put that particular matter behind us.
But okay, but wouldn't that have been a personal issue?
I don't consider it to be a personal issue, because when you look at the names which were included, you can only come to the conclusion that it is because of the fact that those persons serve in public office that the names are included in the report.
Well,
but
maybe.
Wouldn't it have been wouldn't it have been an individual who would have given that report to the police, and wouldn't that person be responsible for their statements?
No,
and not necessarily the Prime Minister.
No, sir. These were reports written by the police officers themselves.
Oh, okay.
So let's talk about another big issue which keeps coming up in these discussions, which is the finance management, CBI, and related issues that have opened deep public conversation. Can you explain to the public the issues related to this program?
The CBI, as we know, is a citizenship by investment program. When we signed the Charlestown Accord, for which I was a signatory to that particular accord, myself, the Prime Minister, and the late Vance Amry, may his soul rest in peace. The Charlestown Accord spoke to the citizenship by investment program and how the proceeds of that program are to be shared among St. Kitts and Nevis. In terms of it actually being shared that way, that hasn't materialized. Now, the Prime Minister is making the argument that the Constitution says what is the revenue sharing agreement between St. Kitts and Nevis. The question then it becomes, why did you sign to it? Did you sign to it as a matter of convenience rather than you having the principled position which you now all of a sudden seem to have? Was it a matter of convenience or what? And so if it is that you only signed out of mere convenience, then again, that is one of the issues that we raised when we wrote to the Prime Minister. Let us discuss it. And the issue has been raised over and over and over again. So there was more than enough time for there to be some sort of compromise or settlement on that particular matter. Each and every time that it has been raised, you get a different response coming from the Prime Minister. You get a response about the World Bank offering assistance. You get a response as to what the Constitution says. You get a response that the technocrats at the Ministry of Finance have been tasked with looking at it and coming up with a solution, so that at no point in time you get that real sense that the Prime Minister is truly committed to seeing this particular issue solved in such a manner that it is accepted by the different parties. The last time I was on this radio program, I indicated that I have been pursuing studies in terms of a doctorate, and my studies have been in the field of creative problem solving, creative leadership, creative problem solving. And one of the things that you learn is that when you have issues, you try to come up with innovative ways of solving these particular issues. You may brainstorm on the issues. You list all the possible solutions. And when you have listed the solutions, you determine which solutions perhaps, after analyzing them, present the best opportunity in terms of an innovative approach. And so when we're tempted to meet with the Prime Minister, part of it is for you to have that creative problem solving, for you to brainstorm on the particular issues and see what solutions we can bring to bear on those particular issues. And I do believe that we have individually and collectively the capacities for us to do so. You take the peace program, a program in which we have seen some results, and that again, persons might refer to it as a creative response in terms of the crime situation in the country. Likewise, a lot of these other issues, we could have come up with a creative solution, with an innovative solution to these issues, had there been the individual and the political will to do so.
Do you believe that there's merit to some of the responses or any of the responses by the Prime Minister? I know we're speaking right now particularly about the CBI program. For instance, because that's one of the issues that I raised on the show before, in terms of revenue sharing, isn't that outlined in the Constitution? Some persons may have a belief that the CBI does not fall into what is covered in the constitutional in the Constitution, stating that it might only be referring to tax revenue and so forth. What is the position of both the PAM and the CCM in relation to that particular claim?
The Constitution is indeed the highest law in terms of the land, and that is what you ought to follow. As I said to you a few minutes ago, creative problem solving. And if this is what the Constitution says, then let us go back to the Constitution. Let us do the exercise. And at the end of the exercise, one can determine what are the merits or demerits in terms of the argument being made for the people of Nevis to receive their fair share. Had you done it in that particular way, then I don't think that anyone could argue and say that there has been no willingness in terms of resolving this particular issue. Instead, we cannot point to the fact that the formula as outlined by the Constitution has been put in place to determine what is due to Nevis or what is due from Nevis. That has not happened. And don't tell me that within the last 7 years, we haven't had the capacity to do so. Because you have persons who work within the Ministry of Finance who could have been tasked with that particular exercise. And if it is that we needed help from elsewhere, then get the necessary help from elsewhere. And then you can stand up and say to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, though we signed this particular agreement, this is what the Constitution says. I recall a few years ago, when I became a member of Parliament in 2004, I held dual citizenship. That became quite an issue a number of years after. And even prior to myself, you had persons within the Parliament who held dual citizenship. It became an issue, and persons said, well, we have to apply what it is the Constitution says. And so I had to renounce the citizenship of the United States of America. So you have seen instances when the Constitution and what it says has been put into effect. You have persons who ask about becoming citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. The Constitution says you have to wait for 14 years. And so those persons must wait for 14 years. Hence, if this is what the Constitution says, and you prefer to revert to the Constitution, then use it. But again, I ask the question, why did you sign the accord, fully well knowing that you have no intent to abide by what the accord says? And to be honest with you, the Constitution says that, but I don't think an individual for one reason or the next might have decided to challenge what is being done outside of the Constitution. However, I think in the spirit of fair share for all, in terms of the CBI proceeds, that you sign the accord and this is what the accord says, that persons would have accepted that you're doing it in the best interest, not of CCM, not of NRP, but in the best interest of our brothers and our sisters in Nevis, so that they too are able to live comfortable, so that the government of Nevis is able to provide as best as possible the services, the resources for the people of Nevis.
So you mentioned fair share. What would that look like for you and the CCM party? For the PAM party and the CCM party, what would fair share for Nevis look like if it was up to you and Honorable Premier Matt Brantley?
The fair share for us would include, just as it says, sharing the resources of the government fairly between the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and not for one set to feel they are deprived. And as I said earlier, it's not even just about St. Kitts and Nevis. The fair share must also be amongst all of the people in St. Kitts also, and not that one man feels that the lion's share must be accorded to himself, while the others continue to speak out on behalf of their constituents, and those cries are being met by deaf ears.
I do believe what we have happening in this case, and it's something that we suffer from almost daily, is a difference in opinion as to what is fair. I'll give you an example. I have a younger brother, as you know, and we would be encouraged by our parents to share and to share freely. However, there were very few times that me and my brother would have the same idea as to what exactly fear looked like, right? For instance, we'll buy some cake, and his idea of fear would be, well, half-half. My idea of fear might be, well, I'm bigger than you, so you're supposed to get a little less than me. And then on top of that, the more I think about it, is my money went for it. So, well, I need more because of that. And I think that it must, like you're saying, we must first determine what fear is in order to really achieve it. And so if you're saying that we have not been able to come to the table to then look at what is happening, look at the situation, including not only, and I think, and I'm going to be quite honest, I think one of the issues that I have with some of these arguments as it relates to the Charlestown Accord in particular, it almost seems as though these were decisions that came forth out of a very small group of men and individuals. Whereas if we're talking about what is fear for Nevis, I would expect that is something that would have included input from persons within the, especially financial sector, persons, like you said, the technocrats and such and such and such. And so my hope is, as we move forward, because this seems to really be an issue that that really drives a lot of friction between the NIA and the federal government. And so I'm hoping that if we move forward, that whoever it is undertakes this exercise in trying to determine what it is, that is something that is transparent, something that we can see that persons with the proper expertise and persons with different minds coming together to determine what that is, because it really it's going on for too long now. This idea of fair share going on, we've been hearing this since 2012, and
it feels very vague. It feels very vague.
Yes, it feels very vague. Every time I hear it, it feels very vague. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the support sometimes wanes behind. It's not that so much that people feel like, oh, Nevis this and what. I think sometimes we don't even know exactly what fear looks like and why it looks the way it's being proposed.
I take your point, and that is why I also said earlier that bring the necessary technical persons to the table, have the discussions, and at the end of it, you make that determination as to what should be given to Nevis, what should not be given to Nevis. Because for me, in a real way, if you involve the persons from Nevis, if you involve the persons from St. Kitts, you have the discussions pertaining to it. At the end of the day, you're able to come to a settlement that both parties can agree to. In the absence of that, you're going to have strife. You spoke about the situation between your brother and yourself, but I'm sure if you had sat down with your brother, you had the discussion. You may not necessarily agree on everything, but you come to an agreement on certain aspects of it. And maybe it is that at the end of it, you decide to involve somebody, your mom, your father, who can bring a different perspective to the particular situation. So that relationship between yourself and your brother continues to be a good relationship. As a matter of fact, going forward, I think it also helps yourself and your brother to be able to sit down and reason on these particular matters, because you would have had the benefit of it on different occasions. You learn from it. You develop a better sense of trust between yourself and your brother. And you might be surprised that going forward, that these issues do not necessarily come out because of that level of trust that you have between the two of you.
Well, Honorable, I'm sorry, but we have just about 5 minutes left as we have to jump into another show right after. But before we go, with the response from the Governor General and the response from the PM and all that we saw happen yesterday, which was a very, very busy day in politics, where do we go next?
I think you asked me that question earlier. As I said, the Governor General did indicate he is going to seek legal advice and then he is going to revert to us. So we await that decision from the Governor General. And while we await that particular decision, we would also be looking at the other options available to us and make a decision as to whether or not we will exercise any of those other options at this point in time.
All right. Well, guys, there you have it from the Deputy Prime Minister himself. I'm pretty sure he will be back with us because this seems like a continuing saga. As in, what did you call this saga?
Dissolve or resolve? But we don't get the answer. We had the season finale. We had the season finale last night, so we're now moving into. I don't think the season game renewed. I don't think we're renewing the season. That was the end.
Yeah, I feel
Final
like this
finale.
is
It's over. Yeah. But I mean, one last question. We mentioned earlier. Well, you mentioned that you, as the leader of the People's Action Movement, based on what's happened, can say that if elections is to happen in the short term, that you guys are prepared. Based on your feeling from the public, do you believe though that the public is ready for a general election?
I do believe that for the most part, the public has been watching, and quite a number of persons within the public domain expected perhaps that a general election might have become necessary. It was not, as I said, our intention, because we continued to dialogue with the Prime Minister. We remained open to the Prime Minister for further dialogue. When he said to us, for example, I am ill, I cannot meet, we graciously allowed for the date to be pushed back for that meeting with the Prime Minister. The second time around, we met with him. No answers were really forthcoming. We sent him a letter. We said, okay, we give you until Wednesday of this week to provide us with a response, and we were willing to meet again with the Prime Minister to dialogue with the Prime Minister to bring a resolution to the issues that we have been discussing, because we very well felt that these are issues that we have the capacity to resolve. Instead, the Prime Minister has said to us that what you have written, I don't think there is any merit to any of the points that you have raised. And so we were forced to take a different step in terms of this relationship with the People's Labour Party. I want to reinforce that this is about the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and ensuring that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis are able to fully benefit. We do not want a dictator in place who determines what every individual must receive or must not receive. This is a democracy, and we must do everything within our power to ensure that our democracy continue to be a thriving one. During the course of this week, I listened to some remarks made by the Prime Minister prior to the elections of 2015, in which he labeled a number of accusations against the former Prime Minister. He spoke about cabinet, how matters are handled by the cabinet, how ministers are treated, etc. And when I listened to it, I came to the conclusion that the Prime Minister now was speaking about himself, because the exact same accusations that he made, he is now guilty of those things. And I've had an amazing number of persons who stated to me, wow, this is the Prime Minister in print. And so that is rather interesting. For those who haven't yet seen that video, I would advise them to take a look, take a listen to it.
Wow, strong words to end on. And I myself need to go back and listen to that. When I find it, I will share it with you, buddy, so we can all be in the loop.
G, I'll send it to you, G.
Thank you kindly, sir. Thank you kindly, sir. But as I mentioned, we have to wrap, unfortunately. This has been, listen, quite a discussion. And we look forward to having more of these discussions with you, sir.
Thank you. And I am more than willing to come back and to speak to the public, because ultimately I am a servant of the people.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Minister Richards, we again appreciate you taking the time out to come and hang out with us on Island Tea. I'm sure our viewers and listeners appreciate it as well. And yeah, man, if you're looking forward to what's next, I could speak for myself, but I'm sure it's a sentiment that's shared by a lot of the public, that we are really just hoping to get through this particular phase of somewhat unease and move back into a place where we could get to really just focusing on governance of the country. I think people really this campaign mode and election mode sometimes gets a bit tiring for us. I don't even want to imagine what it's like for you guys, but I'm sure you as well want to get back to governance. So hopefully we have a smooth transition out of whatever this phase is into the next phase of governance.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Thank you also.
All right, Azem.